Hi everyone, welcome to the Ops Nushke, where we go beyond surface level conversations and unpack the real operational mechanics behind revenue growth. Today's episode is one I'm genuinely excited about because we are diving into something every revenue organization wrestles with. More frankly, actually, very few truly master it. How do you set the right sales targets and quotas? And more importantly, what role does sales operations play in making quotas credible, achievable, and strategically aligned? And how is AI beginning to reshape the way we think about all of this? To unpack this, today I'm joined by someone who has seen quota setting from inside at scale and in very complex organizations. So I'm welcoming Chinesh Gandhi. Chinesh, welcome to the Ops Nushke.
Thank you, Dipti. Really good to be here. Thank you for having me here today.
My pleasure. Chinesh, before we dive into the topic, can we start with a quick introduction and also why you're passionate about this topic?
Yeah, so absolutely. I am Chinesh Gandhi. I lead the quota and revenue allocation team at Microsoft. Talking about quota setting or talking about sales ops, revenue ops, one doesn't go to school to become a champion in quota setting, right? You go to school to learn different things. Like my academic background is I have a master's in industrial engineering and management. And I learned my passion for information systems, quality, driving efficiency, and things like that. And as I grew in my career, I happened to stumble upon sales ops, RevOps, incentive comp, quota setting. And then what I learned was what you really need to be good at is being able to problem solve, being able to see the end to end picture, and being able to execute with a right level of flexibility. Of course, you need thought leadership, but it also learned over a period of time thought leadership with empathy.
Mhm,
So my passion in this space comes from the notion of three key things. One is it gives you the opportunity to look at the big picture of where the company is heading. Second is it talks about how science and art comes together, right? It's the philosophy of human nature. You're trying to motivate humans and you're trying to motivate the outcome, which is very science and number driven.
mhm.
And the third is just, being able to learn. You were very kind in saying that some people have mastered this art. I still consider myself as the student in the game versus the master in the game. But yeah, I think I have many stories to tell given the number of years I've spent in this space.
That's amazing. What an inspiring thoughts you've already started our discussion with. And I'm curious to learn as a result how your perspective has changed on quota setting over the years. What did you think it was early in your career, and now how do you understand it? Has it changed very drastically?
I think it has evolved for sure. I've had the opportunity to play multiple roles in this space.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to quota setting, I've been doing it for a few number of years now. When I first started the process, I looked at it from a process engineering point of view. What are the key inputs? What are the things that we have to get done? And what are the key outputs? Who's going to consume that output? And how do we make sure that people who are consuming it able to provide the output that they are being held accountable to?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of what I thought it as a process is still true, right? But what it allowed me to do over a period of time is continue to get more curious about the process. And as I started digging deeper, I started learning the why behind every single step. So I am on the journey. I haven't reached the destination, but as they say, you've got to enjoy the journey as much as the destination because the real fun is the journey. The destination is just a milestone, right? So from my perspective, where things are now, I think quota setting is one of the many strategic levers the company has to drive its intentional growth, its market share, and sustained success for the customers and partners. So, yes, quota is a process, but the evolution in my thought process is that now I think of quota as the bridge between strategy and execution, right? And it's all of these three need to work in tandem: quotas, strategy, and execution. Because on the flip side, if you have strategy which without quotas is just a theoretical aspiration. And if you have quotas without strategy, it's recipe for loud noise. So I think of it as a strategic lever. It's the bridge between strategy and execution. And I think it provides a unique opportunity where one can and must create a win-win situation for the sellers, for the company, and for the customers and partners.
That's so well explained. It's actually, I mean, easy to say, but I'm sure very hard to put it in reality, right? So, what I would like to know is what role does sales ops play in this? They architect? Are they referee? Executors?
See, I think sales ops is a critical part of the this massive puzzle that we are playing. So from my experience, like my accountability lies with landing hundreds of billions of dollars of quota to more than 35,000 sellers residing in more than 140 countries. So when we think about all the customers and partners that we touch, there are multiple roles and teams who are at play. And when you think about the solution that we build today, it has to be the problem that the customers are going to face today or potentially tomorrow, right? So when we are trying to think about a solution today, which transforms in a set of products. So there is the product team who's thinking of the competitive advantage that they need to have so that they can build the most effective and efficient solution for the customer. To build that competitive advantage, we need the right skill set in the engineering side. Once we have built that, then there is the pricing and then there is the segmentation. Then we say that, hey, what is the sales motions that we're going to need for this? And what's the sales cycle that's going to need for this? And where do we need to have more investment in the relationship roles, in the specialized roles, or in the technical roles? And what kind of skill set will they need to have? And what kind of approach and sales motions will they be supported by? And along with it, there is always the financial aspect of it too, that, hey, you've got the investment in product, investment in people, investment in training, and the cost of doing business and what the customer wants. So how is the ROI going to come through? And that's where finance comes in. And then sales operations plays a strong collaboration role across each of these elements. And then it does the heavy lifting once these things have been finalized to say that, hey, how are we going to convert this into an incentive plan, into the right segment for the customers, into the right number of headcount in every role, and at the end of the day, targets that they can go after to stay motivated. So sales operations does a lot of enablement, readiness, a lot of execution. I think the effectiveness of sales operations increases as they're able to understand the end-to-end picture to say that, hey, what is it that we are going after? So
Hmm.
there is a strict scope and then there is the ambiguous scope. And I think the more you dig deeper into the why, it helps you understand and execute and scale, honestly, right? Like, understanding the why also helps you build the right decision metric for yourself, what decision tree you're going to follow, and then you inform the leaders versus try and take capacity away from them. So sales ops plays that critical role.
Wow. Very well explained. Um, Chinesh, so would you say in quota setting, s- like it's actually about more about data science, leadership negotiation, behavior psychology, or is it like combination of all of it?
Yeah. See, I will answer your question. Let me take a little detour though. When we talk about skill sets, right? There are some preconceived notion or stereotypical thoughts associated with certain skill sets, right? Like when you talk about extremely analytical people who are data scientists or data analysts, they prefer to sit in their room, lock it, do their work, and not get bothered. When you talk about leadership, sales, approaching their customers, these are generally perceived as high energy people, very comfortable, going into the unknown and kind of building the relationship from scratch. And then you have finance and ops where you're trying and finding the balance between the two, where you have to deal with the numbers, but then you also have to kind of make a process that is repeatable and then do the collaboration. So coming back to your question, is it all science or is it art or is it data science or philosophy of human emotions? It's a little bit of everything, but you know maybe I think of it in three simple terms. One is that as a publicly traded company, or as even if it's a not publicly traded company, there is accountability. It's a little bit more transparent and governed in a publicly traded company where you have to produce results every quarter, and you have to show, you have to commit to the street and to the shareholders that there is value in you owning a part of the company. And how are we going to generate that value is by continue to growing the value of the stock. And how is that going to happen? Is going to be able to drive more customer market penetration, more market share of products, more innovation, and more partners for the future evolutions. And then there are people who are at the forefront and who are honestly my heroes, the salespeople, who go and make it happen and kind of pay for all our jobs over here, right? And when they are starting their career, or when they are early in their career, for them, it is like, what is it that's going to make a difference when they are going to buy gifts for their family during Christmas, right? Is it going to be something that they will live with? Is it something that the whole family is going to get excited about? Or a newly wed couple trying to get the savings for their first house to start building the future? Or someone who's seasoned and is at a place where they're thinking about what college the kids are going to go to. So, of course, there's a lot of science and numbers, and as is a good practice, but then there's also the humans that are involved. And then there is emotions, right? Like anything that touches your wallet or your dreams, there are emotions involved. So,
Mm-hmm.
how do we make sure that we find the right mix, that we are being fiduciary responsible, and at the same time, we are driving the rigor of a process that is going to be human, and go ahead with it. So the thing that I like a lot is, let's not make perfection the enemy of good enough. Let's go. Let's go with a sense of speed, but let's be aware that we need to be flexible because we all reserve the rights to wake up smarter the next day and learn and get better. So
Hmm.
that's where I am.
Okay. Wow. So, based on what I've heard so far, I feel like we've just peeled one layer of the onion. It seems like there's so much to deep dive, and let's get practical into it now.
Sounds great.
So, when we are setting quotas in a serious organization, what are the non negotiable inputs? Historical attainment, capacity modeling, pipeline health, growth expectations.
Yeah. So maybe since we talked about peeling the onion, let's go from the end and go backwards, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as you think about the seller, when the seller sees the sales target, what is it that they need to know, right? They need to know what are they selling. So like what are the products and what are the solutions that they are going to maximize the earning potential for. That has to match with their skill set. That hey, they're skilled in certain area and then go and drive product penetration in those areas. They need to know what is their book of business, which is who are the customers, who are they selling to, or what is the territory. They need to know what is the target that they have to hit, what is the number, right? At what point will they be able to get really high attainment, and at what point will they be reaching some excellence point, right? So these are the three things, right? Like, what am I selling? Who am I selling to? How much do I have to sell? And as you think about it as deliverables, then it becomes that, hey, they need to know that a seller needs to be having the right attributes so that when we're dealing with thousands of sellers, we cannot go and say that, hey, what is it that you're going to sell? Like we need to have data attributes that show what skill set do they have. Based on that skill set, we need to know what is the sales incentive plan that can get associated with them, because we need to make sure that the right skilled person is selling the right product so that they know which product is going to drive maximum revenue for them in terms of earning potential. Then we also need to know that, what are the products and targets that they're going to have? Like, hey, how much do they have to sell? So that means we need to have a budget and we need to have that cascaded down to that seller, to that territory, to make sure that it makes sense to them. So then the deliverables becomes that, hey, you need to have the employee with the right data attributes. You need to have the right products with the right sales incentive plans. You need to have the products with the right level of targets. You need to have the customers, which is the book of business for all the sellers, but all our customers and a target to that. So this becomes the next set of deliverables which are non-negotiable. And to derive this, what we need is, how is the world broken down? Like, we have a set of products and we know what is the competitive advantage that is coming to them. So we have those products, then we know that how the product is going to grow based on the investments and the enhancements happening in those spaces. So then we have targets at a product level. And that needs to be, in my company, that needs to be broken down across the world. So how do we take the product opportunity and break it into geo opportunity? Make sure that every geo has been given the right segment of who are the strategic, who are the big customers, who are the small and breadth. And then we start thinking about how is the target going to split from product to the geo and segments. And for each customer, what has been the trend and what is going to be the trend for the future? What is the headcount that is available? What is the coverage that is going to look like? And how do we kind of bring all of this together? So it's multiple different pieces, right? You've got to have budget right, you've got to have the product hierarchy right, you've got to have the geo hierarchy right, you've got to have the budget targets right, you've got to have the data attributes right, you've got to have the systems that can bring all of this together right. So it feels like a big jigsaw puzzle, but that's the fun of it.
Okay. And how much of this actually also influenced by reps' own experience or tenure with the organization or their own performance in the past? Is that something that you take into account as well?
We do, and we kind of try and stay agnostic to it too, right?
Okay.
So when we think about like, we have more than 15,000 enterprise customers, right? And when we think about all of those customers, we know that certain seller might change roles, or certain sellers might have better relationship in different companies, and things could change. So oftentimes science works better when you take the humans out of it. So if we take the humans out of it to say that what's the tenure, what's the relationship that they have, and we just focus on the customer as the account and say, how has the account done historically? What's the compete situation and what's the opportunity going forward? That gives us a very data driven view of opportunity in a customer. Now, of course, there is an element of people, right? Most of these sellers, when they're dealing with the customer, they're talking about deals that are in millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So that element of trust, that element of having the right seniority, the relationship, the tenure, the understanding of the process, the ability to collaborate and bring in the right people are all critical. But I would say to kind of keep the science, keep the humans out, and bring the humans later on, and then adjust. Because if we start with the humans and if the human changes roles, we've kind of created a failure point for ourselves.
Okay. Wow. These are some really key insights. I want to ask you one more concept, top-down approach versus bottoms-up approach. And I've also seen like doing hybrid quota models, some companies going for that. We have these ambitious corporate growth targets from the board, shareholder, seller capacity. But still, we see that even after applying all this science and art and really strong thought process behind it, 70 to 80% of our sellers tend to miss quotas. What are they doing wrong, or who is at fault? Is it the sales execution problem, or is it actually ops modeling problem?
Yeah, I mean, it all also comes down to the perspective and philosophy of success, right? So we often talk about the pay for performance curve in sales, right? And that curve is changing drastically year over year from a philosophical point of view, right? Is the success that all sellers get 100% of the target, right? Now, it's a debatable topic and a welcome debate on that. At the same time, is it a scorecard that is 100% green? Is that a good scorecard? Or has someone been very lenient with the metrics that we have put, right? So
Mhm,
maybe it's not a bad thing that not everybody gets 100%, right?
mhm,
But if nobody gets 100%, then it's a bad thing, right?
mhm.
So being able to predict that future is difficult and perhaps to a certain extent unethical. But being able to kind of put the science on it and drive the numbers forward with a human element to it is important. So from a top down, I can tell you that, hey, if we just do top down, in my books, that's not going to be very successful.
Hmm.
Now, having said that, I just want to make sure I define success first, right? You know, um, no matter what you do from a target setting perspective, like salespeople are my heroes. I respect them. I love them. They pay for majority of our bills, right? Having said that, how many salespeople have you met who came out of a meeting with the quota was signed and said, "Man, I'm so excited. I really like my quota."
True.
So, I think the success measure is not that the salesperson is liking the quota, right? That's why I stay away from terms like accurate quota or fair quota or things like that, right? For me, the success is that the salesperson is able to live with their quota and they are respectful of the experience of how the quota was landed. And they should spend more time about how they are going to build their account plan to retire the quota than to kind of challenge and fight the quota, right?
Hmm.
And that comes down to a lot of culture, leadership empowerment, and philosophy of driving success versus the science of explaining, hey, I went through a chi-square quota distribution channel and then I came into a normalized distribution channel and then this is how it came, because the salesperson's not going to understand that anyways.
Hmm.
Their skill set is very deep in other spaces, not necessarily in data science. So I would say that it is the two words that come to mind the most is collaboration and balance.
Hmm.
That you've got to kind of think about it's probably a hybrid approach. It's not top down or bottoms up. Like bottoms up is like, you know, as I said, there is a commitment that we make to the street and to our shareholders, which we have to meet. And then there is the human element that we have to work through. And as we go through the process, bring in the sales leadership at different levels where it makes sense, so that every step of the way we are able to drive that alignment and transparency in the process. So I think hybrid works really well in terms of ensuring motivation, ensuring alignment, and reducing noise.
Okay. And does the org size matter, Chinesh? Like if for the smaller organizations, you might be able to, work with one or two approaches, but at scale, you definitely need to consider, let's say, hybrid model. Is there any thought process around that?
Yeah, I mean that's a really fair question, right? And when we talk about methodology approach of top down, bottoms up, or hybrid, the size and scale influence as well. My bias is based on my last 20 years of experience where I've been focused on scale, right? Luckily, I work for a company where the growth has been phenomenal. And then every year we've got to kind of drive scale and be able to do more with the same resources and drive efficiency. But when we think about other organizations, perhaps there is an influence depending on where they are in the journey and how they want to set the targets. I would still say hybrid approach is a better approach, so that the fundamentals have to be correct from the beginning, so
Mm-hmm.
that when they scale, they don't have to transform too much, because the fundamentals of you lay down certain principles, you can change your principles, but having consistent principles that allows you to scale automatically is what I would say is prudent.
Okay. That's going to be super helpful for companies who's starting new or planning to launch any new product or getting into new geographies, right? Because sometimes board members' expectations definitely influence strongly when it comes to companies who are still trying to prove themselves in the market, right? Which is why external pressure is quite a lot when you're building up these targets internally. And sometimes the approach is taken like one size fits all. It doesn't matter what AE's experience is, how much they have attained in the past. We want to grow by 15%. This is the target. Let's just divide it same equally amongst all the sales members that we have. And I've seen that's not working. So definitely hybrid model is what you're recommending, what is what I'm hearing right now.
Yeah, you got to have the right measures and controls in place too, right? So When we are talking about scale, and if you have the luxury of having more than 1,000 A's in the company, you can see how each of them are performing across the world, month over month, quarter over quarter. And
Mm-hmm.
that gives you an indication, right? Like some people are going to be covering only two customers because they are one of the largest customers that we have. Some will cover up to 10 because they are significant for us. And some will cover up to 80 or 100 because they bring the breadth and the mid-size for us. So when we start looking at each segment and each role and how they're performing, that also gives us an indication that, hey, have we made a mistake somewhere, and is there an opportunity to do correction of error? Or are we kind of seeing some spots where either the segment is not at the best or the geo is not at its best? And how do we correct some of that? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, like I said, right, like don't make perfection the enemy of good enough and reserve the right to wake up smarter the next day and go fix it. Right. Having said that, we want to minimize churn for the sales force. No one likes to be held accountable to hit a moving target.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we bring stability over there? And as you rinse and repeat and learn, you start getting a sense of where you need to be stable and what controls do you have to fix quickly.
Got it. Okay. So with that, I want to actually get into the thought process when it comes to actually going through the operational workflow of quota planning, from modeling, scenario planning, finance validation. We kind of touch base on these steps a little bit, but I would like to know, what does that orchestration look like behind the scenes when you are into it?
Yeah. So I mean the first part, it all starts with the budget and the forecast, right? Like what does Q4 look like and what is the forecast for the Q4? And then you start bringing some of the sales leadership across the world to drive an alignment so that they can understand which direction the growth percentage is moving towards. So getting the collaboration of that budget and the target is step one. And this is
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily a very sequential process, but for the purpose of this dialogue, let's make it kind of a sequence. The second thing is that we also want to start seeing what is the change that we're going to have in the segment, which customers are ready to have more human touch, which customers are ready to identify where their spending budget for IT is going to look like, and how do we kind of help them be more successful by driving more of the products and solutions that we have. So how do we think about the segmentation of the markets? How do we think about the headcount for each of the market? Are other pieces that are very important, because then you start thinking about your book of business and the coverage that is going to happen. Then you start thinking about where the cleanliness of the data attribute is going to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do the sellers have the right attributes that reflect their skill set? Do the products have the right hierarchy so that, we don't go down to hundreds of products, but we create the right product family so that the sellers know that if they sell something in productivity, they will get the reward for it. So building the right hierarchy in geography, building the right hierarchy in products, building the right attributes for sellers are key components of the process flow. um, Designing the territory, making sure that each seller has the right set of accounts and each of those accounts have the right target associated to them, right? Like going back to the point that you want to first focus on the opportunity in the account and then think about the human element. And then how do you kind of bring all of this together? So it's budgeting, segmentation, headcount, data, hierarchies, book of business territories, quota at account level, and then the sellers getting quota at that level. That is how I would define the flow
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that the pieces are falling together.
Okay. And when it comes to partnering with then finance and HR to ensure these targets are not just ambitious, but they are equitable. Once the quotas go live, what metrics would you recommend that will tell us they are working or not?
There are multiple metrics, right? And as you've seen so far, I will provide the philosophical approach and then the metrical approach, right? We partner very closely with the product teams, finance, HR, all of it, right? So as working with finance and working with HR, we want to make sure that the partnership of driving growth is working for the company as well as for the sellers. If the company is meeting its target and its commitment to the street, but the sellers are not getting to 100% based on our pay for performance curve, there is a gap somewhere. And the
Hmm.
reverse can also not be true, where the sellers are hitting attainment of way beyond 100%, but the company is missing its own target. Then, there is something wrong in how we have set the targets. So, how do we ensure that there is strategy being met and the sellers continue to stay motivated is the metric that we need to track. To track that, there are a number of things, right? Like there is a different percentage as the year goes by, right? And Q4 is always the heaviest year, but are we following the trend where they are making as much target? Are we following the quarterly approach that we have told the street? If there is a gap, what are we doing wrong? Is there a people problem? Is there a process problem? Is there a product problem? Or is there something else that is going on?
Hmm.
Right. So the metrics that we would see is how are people doing in a role? How are people doing from an attainment curve perspective? How is the company doing from the sales target that it has committed on a quarterly basis? And, how is the pay for performance curve looking across the board?
And in between these, there are lots of things that can go south, right? For example, sellers may leave, or maybe funding issues with the customer, which can cause missing of the target in the middle of the year. I don't know if you see that often, but we always have this hockey stick effect. Towards the end of the year, we will see a lot of revenue getting closed, but throughout the year, even though the targets were set, keeping all these points in mind, we still see that gap getting carried over quarter. How can one either avoid or better be equipped from the beginning of the year to see these challenges and accommodate that into their model?
See, that is where a lot of unpredictables come into the picture, right? And you've got to have some kind of a buffer for these unpredictables,
Hmm.
right? Things can happen which nobody has control on. There could be mergers, there could be acquisitions, there could be divestitures, there could be Chapter 11 filing, there could be geopolitical situations, there could be sellers feeling burnt out in an entire geo, there could be leadership changes, there could be number of things that could happen, right? And how you address, like, there isn't a mathematical formula that helps you predict all of this, but
Hmm.
you can address it by putting some buffer and empowering the local regions to play with that buffer and say that this is your empowerment buffer. There could be compete scenario where, a data center went blacked out for a certain amount of time. And guess what? That happened to be during Black Friday. And now the customer is
Yeah.
really happy and the seller is really disappointed, but no fault of theirs. They're going to lose to the competition. So that's where, the leadership will lean in and we'll try and do the best that we can to recoup the situation. But things happen. And how do you continue to stay the course and how do you have that buffer to say what we'll do about it?
Hmm.
Having the buffer and being able to use that buffer is where you're leading with the heart, but still going forward and trying to get the number is where you're leading with the head because you still have to have accountability for things.
Wow. Okay. How tightly should the quotas and compensation be coupled so that there is no unhappiness with the seller's behavior?
Yeah, look, I mean, they're very tightly coupled, whether you like it or not, right? When you think about entire compensation, like as you think about the comp and benefits that the seller gets by working for a company, there is a variable element to it, right? People who are not in the sales role, they have a pretty standard base, which is a big portion of their salary. And then there could be the variable aspect of it. People who are in sales, the base becomes a smaller variable, and then the incentive being driven by hitting the amount of target plays an influential role. And again, it depends on what kind of role you are in. Are you in a relationship role? Are you in a relationship plus technical role? Are you in a super technical role? Right. So the technical roles tend to have less influence of anything that is a variable, but the others will have. So by the nature of it, it's tightly coupled with compensation. And it's one of the many levers that drives the right motivation, right? Paycheck motivates a lot of people. It motivates me. And, how do we leverage this as a strategic lever to ensure that there is a win-win situation? And again, win-win is not described by every seller being happy, but every seller being able to say, yeah, I can live with it, and not
Mhm.
decide to quit. So that's what I would say.
All right, Chinesh, so far, amazing and very interesting discussion. Lots of technical concept as I'm hearing it, and I
Yeah.
will have to go back and listen to this, slowly to make notes and understand each and every meaningful concepts that you've explained to us. I want to shift the gear a little bit and go towards, I think, one of your favorite topics,
Yeah.
AI and its usage in quota setting, how it's reshaping quota setting now. So, as you know, AI is everywhere in revenue conversations now. And we also hear that AI can improve forecasting, territory design, performance prediction, risk detection, many things, right? And to help revenue operators perform well and do their task quickly. Do you think that's real? Or do you think it's just an hype? Where have you seen AI actually meaningfully impacting quota modeling?
Well, that's an interesting question. Maybe next year when you try and have this conversation, it'll be my AI bot talking to you instead of me.
Ooh, that'll be fun. Yeah,
A little scary at the same
I
time.
know.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
I still have kids that need to go through college, but yeah. Uh, from an AI perspective, look, AI is in its journey, and we are learning. Um, is AI everywhere? It does feel like it is everywhere, but it's also not a magic bullet, right? It might feel like it given how much they can do sometimes, but we need to kind of get the fundamentals right, like data hygiene, data integrity, identify which are repeatable and like rinse and repeat step, and maybe use automation versus like doing automation and putting a label of AI on it, right? So there is a lot that needs to go in from a process engineering perspective to kill steps that are not required, identify steps that are most important, make sure that the data coming into those steps are clean and having high integrity and high governance, and then driving automation. Now, the step further from that is how do you kind of start having a system where it can start learning? We use terms like machine learning and deep learning, which are subsets of AI. And you are able to kind of drive that deep learning where it can slowly start building an agency, and the definition of that agency is that the system is able to reason, it's able to think, it's able to make certain decisions, it's able to make certain predictions, it's able to go through and access and synthesize large data models that humans cannot do it as fast and as better as them. So it is a great opportunity. It's fortunate to be living in times where it is happening. Now, I start things with either the customers or the products, right? So when we think about the products, working for the company, I can see AI being penetrated in many of our products, right? Like today, you can go to any productivity suite and see AI. You can go to technical tools and see AI, right? Things like the VS Code is not really a VS Code, it's more of a human language interface when you're trying to do VS Code. Vibe coding is similar to that. You can build apps in minutes. The need for writing BRD is probably going to be challenged very soon and can be replaced by proof of concepts that the business has built out. So a lot of these process which follow the sequence of engineer the process, clean the data, drive automation, engage in deep learning or machine learning, and then build the capability of having an agency to reason, think, decide. So AI is coming, and I think it is going to be phenomenal. When it comes to the quota setting process, there are sub processes where AI can do much, right? Like many of our parents or grandparents would never understand us talking to machines and asking them while working in the kitchen, what's the weather, right? Or, hey, play me this music. But today, it's pretty much a standard practice in many households,
Huh?
right? And it's a journey, right? And now in the future, where instead of saying that, hey, my personal assistant give me a recipe for cake, we are going to move towards a scenario where we are going to be like, it's my daughter's birthday party. 8 kids are coming. They're all 13 years old. Of them are lactose intolerant, and four of them do not have eggs, and they all are very high energy. And this is my budget. And then within the span of 5 miles, identify the stores that I can get the recipe and make a great cake. Right now, being able to have that capability to give the right prompts and being able to get a lot of that solved for is pretty close to reality today.
Mm.
Right. So as we build that capability of deep learning, AI has an opportunity in multiple different areas. How we do forecasting, how we think about creating sales plans incentive, right? Like today we create plans and fortunate to be working for a company where you're doing it for more than 140 countries. Different countries have different laws. Some countries do not allow the sales of data centers outside the country. Some countries do not allow certain products to be in there. So, like, as we think about all these different nuances where humans are spending a lot of time to create governance, AI has the capability to kind of go and drive speed and quality at the same time.
Mm.
When we think about targets and quota, there are peers of mine who are working on driving machine learning on those. That is pretty high. When we think about training and landing and enablement for the field, there is an opportunity of how do we enable AI to build content for that. Today, there are bots where, for the help desk that the support needs, they can go to a bot who can tell them a lot in the human language to go and say, hey, here are some of the questions. So AI in execution is coming.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a great opportunity. It can be nerve wracking because we are humans and we have to deal with change. But the more we learn, the better we will all be because AI by itself is not a threat. The person who's going to become really good at using the AI might be, right?
Mm.
I see, I see the future that I will be coming to the office and having 4 or 5 different agents doing 5 different things for me and then reporting it out to me. And I don't think that's too far off.
Wow. I love the analogies that you gave in between while answering this question. It truly is going to be interesting to see how it shapes up, specifically this part of sales operations function, how far the human judgment can be overridden by the machine recommendations. And yeah, next year, you never know, we'll probably be talking to a bot. Yeah. All right. Chinesh, are we moving toward dynamic quotas or, mid-year recalibration as a result because of AI?
There were a few important lessons when we learned when we all went into the cloud business, right? There were companies who were very much on prem and there were companies who were born on the cloud, right? And at that point, we realized that just having a historical model is not going to be sufficient because when you come up with an innovation like getting into a cloud business or getting into AI, there is no history, right? So
Hmm.
then how are you going to survive in kind of building the forecast and building the right synergies in place? And that's why you've got to be flexible enough and fungible enough where you are able to have a model that can promote innovation, bring in new things which does not have the history, and you can still go and set the targets for those. And there are multiple different levers for that to happen, right? Like what does that, like, let's say for an AI, what competitive advantage does it give? How does it make the customer better? How does it help customer be more successful? What is the productivity gain that they can have? And how do we get that market share? So these are some of the important things to consider, I would say.
Okay, interesting. So now that we have covered our your take on AI, I want to ask you, since you've actually mentioned this during our conversation a couple of times, the human element and how significant sellers' role is, and having them on board is so important. I want to talk about how they think about it as well, right? This is actually like a psychological contract for them. It's not just a number. So, in those circumstances, how do we ensure that sellers see these quotas as motivating rather than simply just an arbitrary number, which can be which is put in front of them? And as you said, like the goalpost either keeps moving or it becomes so unachievable that they don't really care towards the end of the year. and not stay motivated to close more business? And also, what feedback loop we should use between fields and salespeople and then sales ops so that we kind of diagnose the problem earlier versus towards the end of the year?
Yeah, that's a hard question. That's a really good question, but it's a hard one to answer. See, it's super important to drive motivations for the sellers. And you can do it, one must do it with data and with the human element to it. Data is going to be like, hey, how are different roles performing? How are they performing across segments, across geos? And is there a trend that we are seeing? And is there a need for correction of errors, or is there a need to some stuff, or do we stay the course and see how it plays out? And then there is the feedback mechanism, right? As we are designing the process, I would say co-build with the field and
Mm-hmm.
co-build with some of the key members who are closer to the process, right? They understand how they get to see where the rubber meets the road in a local way versus core. So they can be a pretty strategic influencer in landing changes. Then there is a mechanism that I would say that have a constant loop with salespeople. Being the size that we are, we have the luxury of having focus groups, and we can go and chat with 50 people across the world on a monthly basis and do some pulse checking.
Mm-hmm.
Validate that against the data that we are seeing. Validate that against the leadership conversations that we're having. That, hey, what are they hearing around it? Because feedback is genuinely a gift, and using that gift appropriately makes people's lives easier. So if things are working, then what can we do? Are there best practices in one places that we can scale across the world? Then how do we identify them? Um, how do we co-build and learn from each other? How do we make it transparent? That doesn't mean that we agree to everything that everyone asks, right? Like you still have to have the rigor of publicly traded company. But the human element, Salesforce engagement, co-building, and having a constant feedback are fantastic things to have and definitely worth investing in it.
Mm. Wow. All right.
Okay.
If you had to give, and this would be probably the takeaway for our most of our revenue operators here or sales operators, if you had to give them a 5 point checklist for modern credible quota setting, what would you include?
A 5 point checklist for modern quota setting.
Mm-hmm. That's yeah.
First and foremost, I would say get the fundamentals right.
Mm-hmm.
Second, I would say document your principles that guides your decision making. Third, I would say that document the process, test the process, and pilot the process. That's like get the process right. Fourth is check that end to end it is working. And fifth is show growth mindset and reserve the right to wake up smarter and learn fast, fail fast, and improve.
Amazing. Yeah. This makes sense. When you say this in a sequence, it definitely makes sense. Piece of conventional wisdom about quota setting do you think is overdue for disruption?
Well, I don't know. This is another curveballs that is coming my way. Quota, as we think about quota, we got to start rethinking about every aspect of it every year, right? Is 1 year annual quota good enough when the product and the AI models are coming with such different pace? If we make the plans shorter, how do we encourage multi-year thinking with strategic customers who are seeking partnership for a long term? And as we think about the approach, um, is there a different way to kind of motivate?
Mm-hmm.
Can still be money. It can still be quota. Do we want to think about commissions? Do we want to think about contests? Um, so as we think about all of this, making it simple, making it scalable is a foundation that we will continue to have. And things that we will need to look at is how is the motivation going to change? Motivation perhaps is still going to be money, but is that going to be driven by quota or is that going to be multiple different things at play so that you have a constant target and then you have some additional things to excel in the form of either contests or either prizes or some commission are things to be thought through. I don't have the best answer for that. If you find someone who knows, then let me know. I would love to talk to them.
For sure, but you definitely gave a you know good understanding on what is definitely overdue disruption. All right, this brings us to my favorite rapid fire round.
Okay.
This rapid fire, just for our audience, Chinish doesn't know any of these questions. This is gonna be his first instinct, so very interested to hear his take on it. Chinish, it shouldn't be more than like a couple of words,
Okay.
no long answers, okay?
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. So, annual quotas or rolling or dynamic quotas, and why?
Annual quota is now dynamic in the future.
Okay. One metric that every sales RevOps team should obsess over when it comes to quota designing.
Seller motivation.
Interesting. I was thinking you would say something more like, okay, forecast accuracy or growth. But that's good to know. Keeping sellers mindset in mind, that approach. So, lovely answer. What's more dangerous? Over ambitious quotas or sandbag quotas?
Wow. Or ambitious quotas.
Okay. Why do you think so?
Like, I don't want salespeople to feel like the company doesn't care for them and that they should be frustrated and look for opportunities elsewhere.
Okay.
I think they should consider integral part of the process. Uh, they don't need to be happy. They need to be something that they can live with. But I am a big fan of my salespeople, and I think we need to make sure that motivation and frustration are distinct, different behaviors. And where do we draw the line on that?
Thanks for giving that explanation. If 70% of our sellers are missing quota, first place to look into sales leadership, territory design, or modeling assumptions.
If 70% of the salespeople are missing quotas, where would we look into first? I would look at the targets first.
Okay.
Budgets, yeah.
So, modeling assumptions,
Modeling assumptions, yeah.
top down targets or bottom up modeling.
Hybrid.
I think yeah, we discussed this. Yes. And also, I think this one we covered AI in quota setting. Is it a game changer or overhyped? But not in future, now.
Of a game changer. It's real.
Okay. Okay. One outdated belief about quota setting that needs to disappear.
That it happens top down and that pipeline plays a big role in it.
Hmm. Okay. That's interesting. Okay. All right. You did amazing.
Okay, thank you.
That was fun. I think, Chinesh, this has been incredibly insightful discussion. I love that this conversation showed me and our audience quota setting is not just a spreadsheet exercise. It is strategic, it is behavioral, operational, and actually increasingly becoming technological. And I thoroughly enjoy my conversations with you, but I would also love to have a bot who's automating these things for us so that we
Yeah.
can focus on bigger and better things, right? So, for our listeners, if you found this episode valuable, share it with somebody who is in your sales or revenue operations, who's planning or needs to review their targets right now. This is Ops Nushke, where we decode operational playbooks behind real revenue growth. Until next time, bye for now. Thank you again, Chinesh.
Thank you for having me and thank you for what you're doing for the community. I've seen your past episodes and they were very insightful. So thank you and all the best to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.